My preaching professor in seminary said that on Palm Sunday, the reading is so long that many of you will want to preach a short sermon for your congregations. And everybody in the class went, yeah, that makes sense. And he said, you are wrong. He said, if anything, you should preach a longer sermon. I'm going to take the middle road there. Because we have choices in life, don't we? We can choose things. We have that innate ability in us, that free will instilled in us by God to choose things. I can prove it to you. Pepsi or Coke? Not on the list, Barbara. Football or opera? On the list, Barbara. Summer or winter? Oh, now we're getting more divided. Cool. Don't worry, I'm not going to go to a dark place. Right one or right two? I love you oneers. I love you twos too. It's fine. Ice cream or cake? Cake or pie? Isn't it weird how people prefer cake over ice cream, but then you get pie in there and they're like, mm-hmm. Oklahoma or Texas? Not a choice, Kim. See, so we have choices. We make them all the time. We choose what we like. We choose what we do. We choose who we follow. I chose to preach a middle-length sermon, right? Which for me, who knows what that means? It's interesting the choice that is brought before the crowd. See, you remember the Passion probably pretty well. You've heard this story countless times, this gospel that is read to you, this passion of Jesus Christ. How many times has it dawned on you that there are two Jesuses here? There's just not that many times where we recognize the fact that Barabbas' first name is what? Yeah. Anybody catch that? Yeah. Doesn't that make you a little weird inside? It bothers me a lot. Because the people are getting a choice between two Jesuses, aren't they? In a moment of anger and of violence, in a moment of judgment, they get a choice. They can choose a man who is a known murderer and violent and an outcast of society. Or they can choose a man who has overthrown all tenets of what used to be and is trying to change the world for better, who has performed miracles, who has raised the dead. They have two choices before them. Who do they choose? Would you choose Barabbas? Are you sure about that? I think we choose Barabbas every single day. Not all the time, but I think we choose the wrong Jesus sometimes. The Jesus we ought to choose is the Jesus who loves everyone, who respects the dignity of every human being, who feeds the hungry, who clothes the naked, who forgives without pause. Do we do that? Do we do that? That's a real question. No, we don't do it very well at all, do we? A Jesus who makes sure to go out and sit with the people who maybe smell funny or look funny or who have weird jobs that other people don't like. Do we do that? Not a whole lot. Instead, they chose a guy who goes out and kills people. A guy who's violent because they know they can control that guy. They can't control Jesus, can they? They can't control this changer of things. This man that's coming out and literally turning the world on its head, who's saying everything that was previously known is wrong. You're doing it wrong. So instead of choosing the violent, hurtful, hateful person, they choose the one that they can't control, the one who's going to change what they know forever, because they're afraid of change. They're afraid of moving. Anybody in here like change? Most of you are Episcopalians. I know you don't. Wow, that's kind of funny. It's kind of true, too. So let me ask you again. Which Jesus would you have chosen? Would you have chosen Barabbas? I know I would have. At that moment, I don't know the end of the story. I don't know that Jesus is actually the Son of God. That goes on faith, doesn't it? We have something they didn't have. It's called the Bible. We know the end of the story. We know that Jesus Christ is resurrected, don't we? We get to sit from a judgment seat that's way, way higher than those that were there, don't we? Because we know the end of the story. We know what happens. Of course we say we choose Jesus because we have the knowledge of insight into what actually occurred. These people were so afraid that they chose violence instead of salvation. They were so afraid of changing, even just a little bit, that they chose to keep the status quo, and they chose to continue to hate and to continue to kill and to continue on the way they were. Does that sound like the world we live in right now? Scott, I've forgotten. How many acts of violence have there been in schools in the last few days? Thank you. Acts of violence. Notice I'm not going political here. Acts of violence. Acts of violence, 4 of them in the last 6 days. Yeah. Last night at a bar, 3 people died and 3 people were injured at a shooting in Oklahoma City. Did you know that? There was a fight in front of Coy's table at his karaoke bar last night. Do we still choose Barabbas? Do we? The problem with us is our expectations are different than what we actually receive, and I can prove it. The people that were holding these palms when they watched Jesus walk into the city as a conquering hero saw Jesus as someone who was going to overthrow the government, who was going to change things on a practical level. They're waving here and doing this. Hoshashana, Hoshashana, Hosanna, right? Hoshashana. Do you know what that means, literally? Deacon Dion, what does that mean, literally? God save us. These people are literally shouting, God save us, and they're waving palms. And they didn't get their way. There are people expecting something and got something else, but it wasn't good enough, was it? So they chose violence. I wrote earlier this week, and the opening line was, Christians, we have a problem. And I'm going to continue on with that. We are violent by our speech. We are violent by our nature. We are violent by our actions. And we are violent in our opinions. That is my opinion. If you disagree with me, that is fine. I'm just trying to speak the truth to you that I hold. And it's this. When we say at least we don't do that, or we condemn someone for doing something like that, we become the very people we hate. We really do. We become those who choose Barabbas because we're like, you know what? No, you're wrong. There's no way you're right. There's no way that you could possibly see Jesus in that situation. But God talks to everybody all the time, and God is here for everyone. God is here for everyone. Jesus Christ didn't die on the cross for the Episcopal Church of the Resurrection. Jesus Christ died on the cross for the sins of the entire world. Everybody. People from Texas, people from Oklahoma, people from Connecticut, people from Lebanon and Syria, people from Liechtenstein, which nobody's ever been to, except for maybe Dawn. Fine, you too. People that have sat in classrooms, people that didn't finish high school, people who are rich, people who are poor, people who are black, white, Asian, people who are gay, people who are straight, people who don't know, people who voted a certain way. All people. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? That is a question. Do you believe that Jesus Christ came to save all people? Then why are we not living into it? Notice I say we, not you. Why are we not living into this? Why are we so judgmental? Why do we have to be so important, self-righteous? Why do our opinions matter more than others? Why? Is our identity as something else other than Christian more important than being Christian? It shouldn't be, but sometimes I wonder. So you have another choice this week. You can come on Palm Sunday and you can wave the fronds and you can wait for the resurrection next Sunday. That is a choice. And I'm going to tell you, I'm glad to see you today, and I'll be glad to see you next Sunday. There's a second option. You can come every single day this week and choose to witness what happens to Jesus Christ between incarceration and resurrection. You can choose to walk with Jesus as we make right choices, as we try to dive into the scriptures and become better within ourselves. This isn't a thing so the church can have a lot of people in it. It's a thing so our soul can be filled. Does anybody start a movie, fast forward after 15 minutes and go to the end? Anybody read the last page of the book first? Kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? We have a choice today. And I'd like to think that sometimes I wonder if I choose Barabbas during Holy Week, if I choose keeping the status quo, if I choose to just not pay attention to the pain and suffering of Christ, to the meal in the upper room, to the washing of the feet, to the departure of the disciples, to the crucifixion, if I just miss all that so that I don't have to see it, so I can close a blind eye to it like I do all the other tragedies in the world. You have a choice. Which Jesus will you choose?